Now, I don't know about you, but for me, I like being proactive with our security maintenance. And right here, I got my proactive security maintenance triangle. And in this video segment, we're going to cover all things about how to be proactive in our security maintenance. And that comes across, a bunch of things, right? We've got patches, vulnerabilities, and how do we know they exist and how are they available to us? Well, how do they make themselves available to us, I should say. So in this video, we'll cover some areas around how do we be proactive, where do we go to get updates, and then we can take a look at how we incorporate that into our internal security posture. So the very first thing that I would say is, vulnerability management is part of every organization, right? Every organization that currently does vuln management um, relies on a couple of things, right? We've got our frequency, depending on how often we do vuln management and how our reporting structure is and our scanning processes are. We've covered this off in a previous video that we spoke about the different types of vulnerability scanning, like our active and passive scanning, some things that the active scanners do and the other scanners don't do. We've looked at creds and no creds and things like that. So typically when we do vulnerability management, if we're doing this maybe every 30 days, and then a critical update maybe gets released on the 25th day, there's a bit of changes or a bit of a time difference here, right? So what I'm getting to is, well, if we have to then wait another 25 or so days before our next patch management or our next vulnerability management cycle for the next month, well, do we really need to wait, or can we not just go away and patch, or do a quick vulnerability management update or a patch cycle for those critical patches? And chances are that it is part and it is incorporated into that vulnerability management cycle as well, right? So all through our documents and processes should be defining that if there is a critical update, well, then how do we go away and how do we deploy that? So what are some of the sources that are available to us when we do vuln management, patch management, and where do we get these updates from? Well, they typically come from a lot of our vendors, right? So when we talk about vendor websites, if we're using a specific vendor that we currently have in our infrastructure, and I'm just going to name some here off the top of my head. So we've got Cisco, we may have Checkpoint, we may have Fortinets. Well, chances are you've probably got account managers from those different teams. So you can obviously talk to them about running proactive updates. So anytime, they're obviously being aware of your environment and what you're currently having. And if they're not, well, they should be, because they should be updating you on certain security measures, how to get the best out of your appliances, and obviously the different types of environments that we're operating through. So speak to obviously the vendor websites, speak to your account managers across those different vendors and ask them to be proactive with your maintenance. So how do we go about having proactive security maintenance across our certain vendors? And obviously they may have their own processes to do that. In this video, I'm just sort of covering this off at a high level because, once you go to a vendor website, you can then subscribe to their feeds, right? If we're going to go to maybe to Talos, Cisco Talos is threat intelligence, or Mandiant, which is a very common one, which is now part of Google. We can sign up and we can receive newsletters and updates from these vendors. So, we don't need to then dig around and try to find them. It's chances are it's across our infrastructure. So if we're running certain vendors or certain updates, we can then be proactive with those, the information that gets sent to us, right? Then they have things like bulletins. I'm just going to write bull for short. There's bulletins. We can reach out to certain bulletins that these vendors may have, or weekly in reviews, or they may have, advisory networks that we can tap into. And we've got things like OzCerts, and then we've got things like the ACSC as well. These are all sort of networks that do have these updates, and they do threat updates and vulnerability updates, and maybe they do a monthly review or a monthly update of the last month that's occurred. So these are all kind of how we be proactive across the environment. And the very first thing that I'm just going to stress, that I can't stress more of, is reach out to your current vendors that we have in our environment, because they obviously have they're in their environment, they're working obviously with that certain platform that you're using or utilizing. And then you can incorporate that proactiveness and obviously the patches or the security updates a lot sooner than waiting that 25 days or 30 days in change of cycle. So where else can we go? Now, there's other areas that we can look at going to as well. And there's obviously ISACs. So the Information Security and Analysis Center, we can go there and they've got some updates or group sharing. So they're obviously group peers that sort of they come out into the network and they start talking about security updates and briefs and maybe playbook scenarios and what other certain industries are doing. So peer networks are quite important. So there may be certain briefings that are occurring either through some vendors. There's obviously events that obviously happening in the industry and new products that are getting brought into the market and things like that. So, there are tons and tons of ways to get updates and get new information daily. And chances are we don't need to scour for information. We can have these feeds sent to us, every morning. And this is what I used to do when, when we're doing some sort of threat management stuff in the past. You would come into the morning and then you would have a bunch of updates that you just sort of refresh, and you'll just sort of go through these updates every morning and just make sure that there's nothing vital, nothing critical that needs to be escalated, or, and if there is, then we've got our proper triaging and investigation process if we need to, again, go back into a change management cycle, release some patches because there's a critical vulnerability that's been updated, and the likes of that. So just make sure that there's things that are happening all around us. Again, Isaac, the peer networks have been around for a long time, and they do some amazing things. And then obviously events as well, right? So the new vendors that come into the market, they may have some other information that can sort of tie into your current breed of vendors that you're using, and then you can sort of have that update that sort of gets sent to you, and then you can review them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and then you're obviously kept up to date with your security environment. I hope you found this video useful. It's a very short video for once. If there's any other comments that you'd like to see, please let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video.